that
really?
point, I had my little show bud pedal steel. I still have it here. I don't know if you can see it in the camera.
I see it right there. Yeah, right behind you.
Yeah, that
Look at that
one.
thing. Yeah. So after doing all that stuff with Eno, you guys developed some sort of shorthand around how you worked together and how you produced together.
Yeah, we always got results fast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I was quick with I was quick in the studio and quick to come up with a part, and everything always came our way quickly, and so we weren't scratching our heads or running into roadblocks.
That's interesting that it happens quickly, but the sound that you're creating is quite spacious. You would never think that anything was moving too fast during the ambient records.
No, the tempos aren't. Well, the processings were quick because we developed this technique. Because in most recording studios, people up to that point, people were listening to their effects almost as a side bar to the main components, and you might have a reverb on a vocal as you're working along, and then when you finally mix, you would go back to that and recreate what you were most excited about. But we had a technique whereby those effects were not just showing up as a temporary sound in the blend. They were assigned to a stereo pair ready to be printed all the time. So if we got lucky and we hit on something that was really cool, I would just press record and we printed the sound effects,
right,
which would then allow us to treat those as instruments and send them back to the effects again. And so we just kept adding to the chain of effects, and eventually we hit on these quite radical sounds for that time. And that's how we hit on a lot of those real spacious, those octave sounds and those celestial sounds, let's call them. And I got hooked on that, so we never treated our processing as something that you just have as a convenience along the way, but we treated them like the sounds that were the most important.
And it's interesting because those sounds that you guys came upon are always sort of hovering in almost all of your records that you do for other people. It's sort of like, what's that in the background? That's just a space sound.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we got pretty good at it, and I have continued with it. Yeah, I've even gotten better at it in modern times. I found a way to finally, because the problem with reverbs and long textural sounds is they can bleed over chord changes and really screw things up. Kind of bleed.
Oh, I see. Oh, right, and then it almost sounds out of tune.
Yeah, so
right.
Let's say you've got a chord that's a semitone up from the root chord, and if the root chord carries on and with reverb, then it's a train wreck. So I found a way of dealing with it now, where as the chord change happened, then the textures also shift harmonically, so you don't get the bleeding effect. I mean, it's getting into pretty technical stuff here.
No, but it explains a lot. I just I noticed even on your first solo album, and I haven't listened to this new album, but that you found out a way to blend these aural elements that you sort of perfected with Eno with something, more almost acoustic. So there's this weird mixture of something where you put an instrument up front in a very clean way, and it sort of moves around with each instrument. But the bed of sort of celestial echo, kind of is always present, creating another texture, but it doesn't take away from this almost analog nature of some of the instruments you put up front.
That's because those textures are not just a reverb.
Right.
They are samples of the front sound pushed back into the multi-track and laid in such a way that they provide harmonic backing to the front melody.
And that's your magic, Daniel. That's the trick right there, right?
It's part of the new trick right there. And it's very dub driven. We call it dubs now, sort of.
Yeah.
We've gotten pretty good at it.
It's great, man. And it's okay, so after you and Eno make these discoveries, so how does it happen that you produce the biggest U2 record that, ever existed, and arguably probably one of the biggest U2 well, I guess you did Unforgettable Fire first, which was pretty fucking big. How did that? Why did you guys? Because I know that had been producing people, John Cale and some other folks, and but how did you two happen?
While we were working on, I think let's say the Apollo record in Hamilton, Eno got an invitation sent in from his office, and the invitation was, well, there's this young Irish band that would love to have you produce their record. And he said, I'm not at all interested in producing anymore. I don't want to produce anybody. And he was living at my house at the time.
In Hamilton?
Yeah.
You're just living with Brian Eno in Hamilton? Like, I'm sorry, my memories of that city, I mean, I think at that time it was probably still, it was a little beat up when I was just there. So it's hard for me to picture it in its heyday, but it must have been, it was pleasant. He was just hanging out at your house. Was he hiding?
Nobody knew who he was. We worked in the day in the studio, and then we drove to my house at night and listened to our mixes and, partied a little bit. It was a lot of fun in those days.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
We had a nice spot on the mountain, so away from the factories. It was nice. So we take the tape. They sent a demo tape, and I said, well, let's at least listen to the tape.
Let's listen to these guys.
And I put on the tape, and I thought, wait a minute. The singer's got something. He can really hit the high notes.
Yeah.
I thought, there seems to be kind of a vibe here. He said, no, I'm not interested. I said, well, listen, I'm trying to get a foot in the door in this world of producing at this point. I said, why don't you introduce me and I'll produce the record? He said, well, I don't know if we can pull that off.
Yeah.
But anyhow, we got talked into going to Dublin to meet the guys. And with the ploy was Eno was going to introduce me, he walks, and I make the record.
Right. Yeah.
So that was the idea, because he was trying to help me out. We were good friends, at this point.
Sure.
And, there we found ourselves in a car, crunched up in the back, the whole band in one car, me and Eno. And Bono did it. They played some tracks they were working on, and Bono stopped shouting in the car because he's really good at convincing people,
Uh-huh.
And before we knew it, he convinced Eno that we were going to do it and
all together. Yeah, Bono hustled you guys. He turned on the charm.
That's right. Yeah, it worked.
But that seemed to start something. I mean, maybe for you and maybe for Eno as well. That to sort of apply the things that you guys were discovering in the studio, that was, I mean, I would say it's not that it's not accessible, but it's, a very small audience, for what some of the stuff that Eno was doing. So now you have this opportunity to apply these techniques and these sounds that you guys are discovering to, what is, a mainstream act. So what was the negotiation? How did you deliberate that? They
wanted to bring Eno in because they knew that he'd have, a fresh way of looking at things. They didn't want to make the same record they had just made before. They wanted to move on. We took a lot of our atmospherics and our celestial sonics to Dublin, and so it was kind of the next stage. That's why Unforgettable Fire has a lot of texture to it, because we were excited about that technique that I described to you.
Right.
And so we were able to apply that to what they were doing.
Right. And they dug it?
They dug it, and, it was a bit of a thing that was happening already. The Simple Minds had New Gold Dream, which was was quite panoramic sonically in itself. And so and they were peers, and so that record was a point of reference for us. And so they welcome the textures. And so that's why that record went in that direction, because we were able to export from Canada to Ireland.
So that was sort of caught in that almost, bordering on gothish new wave thing.
Yeah, it had goth in it. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But after we finished The Unforgettable Fire, I said to The Edge that I thought we had something left to say. And so if he wanted to invite me back in, then I think, we could do another great record. And then we did the Joshua Tree.
But in between that, you did a Peter Gabriel record. You worked with Eno's. Is that Eno's brother?
Well, the Peter Gabriel record. Peter called me because he had heard the ambient records. He had heard the Harold Budd records.
Right.
And he was doing a soundtrack for a film called Birdie, with Alan
Right.
Parker. I was brought in to kind of weird things up a little bit to do a soundtrack, and I really liked it. He had a nice studio in the country. It was just an old converted cow barn. And he took me in this vault. He said, well, it was just a bunch of 2-inch tapes from his past work. He says, go through any of this stuff, pull out anything you want from the shelves, and if you bump into something that you want to weird up and, you know, that you think might have some kind of might apply to the soundtrack, then by all means. So that's it. I just kept taking 2-inch tapes off the shelf, and I played them, and I'd find I'd slow something down and pick out a melody, and then so I surprised Peter with a whole bag of things that were new to him because I had changed the face of them. You might say
You weirded him up.
I weirded them up.
But then you made a huge record with him.
Well, after that, he said, "Well, why don't you stick around and make my song record?" Because, you know, the going was good. You know, we were getting somewhere. And I said, okay. And that was that. We went off and did, you know, a record called So, which had Sledgehammer on it and In Your Eyes.
Huge record.
Huge record for Peter.
So now you're a guy. You're a big, now you're a producer. You're in, man.
Yeah. My manager at the time was dragging me through every office in New York, and all the doors were open to me.
Here's the guy that weirds things up. It's working. It's awesome, man. And then, but I love that you still make time to, like, you know, do your own work and also get a couple of John Hassel records in there. Yeah,
the John Hassel records are far out. I heard one of them somewhat recently, and I was really impressed with them. My goodness, we went deep.
The Fourth World Music. Like, I don't know. Did you do the one where there was one that just blew my fucking mind when I was in college in, I guess it was probably 82, and it was one where there was water being used.
Water slapping Pygmy.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
You did that record?
Yeah, man. Did that record.
Oh, man, that changed my life.
Oh, good.
Like, I had one of those, it was a drugless astral projection experience. I was sitting in my room, my dorm room, listening to that through big speakers, and I left my body.
Yeah, oh, good. But the water slapping thing, like...
Yeah, exactly, man.
Yeah, and then we went the distance with it, and I pulled out all the stops, and we had this great sound on John's trumpet. We were excited about this harmonizer at the time, which
gave it these weird kind of...
Yeah, exactly.
What were those? Yeah.
His tone was like that to begin with, because he didn't blow the trumpet hard. He had found some way of playing very softly. And he kept this little Indian tuning instrument right by him.
Right.
A little tambura. It was always, it's not on the record, but it's right by him as his point of reference for pitch.
Right.
And then I had him mic'd real close, and then we had this box called the AMS harmonizer, and we dialed up a sound a fourth above. So for every note that he played, he had a harmony up above him.
Right.
So
that blew my mind, man.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I made those records. And it seemed normal to me at the time, but when I heard it back recently, I thought, oh my goodness.
Nothing's like that.
Nothing's like that.
Yeah.
To this day. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And it's just great. Okay, so you talked to Edge. He brings you back for Joshua Tree, and that was you and Brian again, or mostly you?
That was me and Brian again. We decided to do tag team work. I did 2 weeks. Did 2 weeks.
Now let me ask you a question, personal question. Now, not personal, but it struck me on listening to that record that some of the melodies were definitely either yours or Brian's or both. That they didn't come with the band.
Well, I think at that point they were appreciating that we were able to have musical input into their work. I'm not saying we wrote the songs or anything, but we were able to suggest a melodic direction that
it definitely felt like you guys, like ba 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 da ba ba da ba da da, you know.
Yeah, but that's right. That's a very that's a Celtic melody, but it's also a penny whistle melody. Ba-da-da,